Hey guys! Today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. On December 31st, 2020, at about 2 p.m., the San Diego County Law Enforcement Station receives a call from 37-year-old Jade Yanks. She reports the disappearance of her stepfather, an elderly man who had recently completed treatment at a medical facility. Jade expresses concern, claiming he vanished without warning. The situation seems routine. An older person with health challenges could have simply gotten lost. However, something in Jade's voice, her unnaturally calm composure, and a certain rush in her tone, raises suspicion in the dispatch officer. The call is logged, and a patrol unit is dispatched to the residence. Jade meets the officers outside the home. She conducts herself with quiet, politeness, and restraint. Inside, the house is spotless and orderly, but the reality beneath this facade of normalcy diverges sharply from the appearance of a routine family matter. In truth, this story began long before the disappearance, and its conclusion would prove far more horrific than anyone had anticipated that day. Jade Yanks, a California native, was raised by her father, her sole guardian since childhood. He provided stability, care, and support, while Jade's relationship with her mother remained complex and intermittent. Her mother, struggling with dependencies and mental health challenges, couldn't offer the attention and care Jade needed. Even so, Jade made efforts to maintain contact, visiting her occasionally. At 14, her mother met Tom Merriman, who later became her husband, and for Jade, her stepfather. Tom was older, employed, and outwardly responsible. When Jade's half-brother Cash was born, Jade felt a deep affection for him and wanted to spend as much time with him as possible. At first, Tom was simply her mother's new partner, no fatherly role. Their early interactions were formal and surface level. But over time, through conversations and mutual respect, a bond formed. Tom always called Jade his daughter. When Jade's mother, due to her relapse, missed her half-brother's first school assembly, Jade realized she needed to step in. She made a conscious and courageous decision to move in with Tom and Cash to shoulder part of the family's care herself. From that point on, Jade Yanks became the full-time caretaker of Tom's home, handling the cleaning, managing daily routines, and looking after her younger brother, essentially stepping into the role her mother had gradually abandoned, both physically and emotionally. Sharing these responsibilities through difficult times brought Jade and Tom closer. Together, they tackled household and family issues tied to her mother's increasingly unstable behavior. This partnership strengthened their bond. For Jade, Tom became something like a second father, a steady adult presence during a time when her mother's life was unraveling completely. Later, after her mother was taken into custody, Jade remained with Tom and her brother Cash. They relocated to a new house, hoping for a fresh start. By then, Jade was in her early 20s. She took full responsibility for her brother and continued managing the household. In many ways, Jade Yanks had lived between two different worlds from a young age. One filled with her father's consistent love and care, and the other where she had to shoulder adult responsibilities, stepping in to support a household that was falling apart. Tom became her anchor in this unpredictable existence, and their relationship grew into one built on deep trust. That bond, so vital to Jade, would later make what unfolded even more painful. Tom Merriman, a 64-year-old resident of the coastal city of Solana Beach in San Diego County, was known as a man of strong reputation and a well-ordered life. He had 3 biological sons, but often spoke of having 4, always referring to Jade Yanks as his daughter, even though they shared no blood relation. For many years, Tom had worked in palm tree cultivation, but in 2011, he shifted careers. Partnering with a like-minded colleague, he launched a butterfly farm that specialized in selling plants designed to attract butterflies to gardens. The venture turned out to be successful, particularly during the pandemic, when people began spending more time at home and took a stronger interest in gardening. From a business standpoint, Tom seemed to have it all together. He was widely respected as someone passionate about his work, devoted to nature, and meticulous with every plant on his farm. Customers spoke highly of him, and colleagues admired his professionalism. But his personal life told a different story. Tom was dealing with serious health complications. Years of alcohol misuse had taken a toll on his liver and heart. While he maintained the appearance of being functional and productive, he was under constant medical supervision and relied on powerful medications. By the end of 2020, after undergoing eye surgery that temporarily impaired his vision, Tom suffered a fall and sustained injuries that required an extended rehabilitation stay in a medical facility. During that time, Jade Yanks assumed full responsibility for the household, regularly visiting to keep things in order and prepare for Tom's return. She knew he wouldn't be able to manage things alone once he got home. After moving into her mother's household, Jade began actively taking part in the daily life of the family. Living with Tom settled into a routine. Their roles were clearly defined. He provided financial support and was around the house occasionally, while Jade handled everything inside, managing daily chores, emotional support, and family logistics. Yet beneath that surface of stability, internal tensions slowly began to build. Over time, Jade realized she was carrying more than her share of the weight. She was handling nearly all the responsibilities at home, while Tom became increasingly distant. Even though he was the father of her younger brother, it was Jade who was addressing all his day-to-day needs, which left her feeling overwhelmed and resentful. She felt like a background figure, always expected to help, but never asked how she was doing or what she needed. What made things especially difficult were Tom's frequent remarks about her biological father. Jade had always shared a close bond with her dad. He had given her a sense of stability, raised her with care, and supported her through life. Tom, on the other hand, made no secret of his dislike for him. He would openly belittle Jade's father, constantly comparing himself to him in an effort to cast himself in a better light. It felt to Jade like he was trying to replace her father, not just in the home, but in her mind. These comments struck her deeply as a sign of disrespect toward her father and toward herself. A growing sense of unease took hold inside her. Jade began to question where her personal boundaries really were. She didn't want to leave the house too soon. Her brother still needed her, especially with their mother no longer present. But the idea of continuing to live in an environment where her feelings went unnoticed was becoming harder and harder to accept. Her contribution to the family had become something taken for granted, without thanks, without recognition. Eventually, Jade made the decision to leave. It wasn't a rash move. It was a carefully thought-out choice, driven by built-up frustration and a desire to reclaim control over her own life. She moved out to start living independently and to focus on her career. She maintained contact with Tom and her brother, as their relationships, while somewhat distant, remained civil. It was a period of quiet separation, one that would soon take an unexpected turn. The move marked a turning point for Jade. For the first time in years, she could fully focus on herself. She poured her energy into professional growth and building a life on her own terms. While she didn't cut ties with Tom and her brother entirely, their interactions became occasional and formal. Her bond with her brother remained strong, but she preferred to keep her distance from Tom. The years passed, and it seemed their shared chapter had quietly come to a close. But then, completely by chance, life took a strange turn. Jade purchased a house on the very same street where Tom lived, just a few doors down. It was an unexpected coincidence, but it led to the slow rebuilding of their connection. At first, it was limited to brief sidewalk conversations. Then came occasional invitations to dinner. Over time, their relationship found its way back to something steady and familiar. To those around them, Jade and Tom appeared close. There was no visible sign of tension. He seemed genuinely grateful for her attention and care, especially as his health continued to decline. Despite past frustrations, Jade didn't show any signs of anger or bring up old conflicts. On the surface, It looked like they had managed to rebuild trust and create a mature, stable relationship. However, Jade's true motivations remained unclear. She resumed their previous pattern of communication, but without the same warmth or openness. Her behavior felt more like an obligation than a heartfelt attempt to reconnect. She was polite and considerate, but kept an emotional distance. On one hand, she was once again present in Tom's home. On the other, she no longer felt like she belonged there. Their interactions maintained a quiet equilibrium, but it was only an illusion of harmony. And it was under these conditions that the story began to take a drastic turn. In late 2020, while Tom was recovering in a medical facility, Jade was cleaning up at his house. As she wiped down a table, she accidentally touched the computer. It had been in sleep mode, and it suddenly came to life. What appeared on the screen stunned her. It was a private, intimate photo of herself, fully exposed, one she had once sent to a former partner in confidence. At first, Jade tried to find a logical explanation. Maybe a glitch, maybe a mistake. But it quickly became clear that this was no accident. The image had been deliberately set as the desktop background, filling the entire screen. It was an intentional act, not a random technical error. She froze, unsure how to respond. In the home of someone she had once trusted, she had just encountered a shocking invasion of her privacy. That moment would become a turning point, one that changed her perception of Tom permanently. What she saw wasn't just deeply unsettling, it hinted at something potentially criminal. She had no way of knowing where these images came from, or, more disturbingly, whether any of them had been taken when she was underage. And though more disturbing discoveries still lay ahead, in that moment, Jade understood that her life had just shifted irreversibly. Instead of leaving the house, Jade remained, stunned, but driven by the need to understand. She powered up the computer and began combing through its files. Outwardly calm, she was consumed by a growing sense of dread. Opening the file manager, she quickly noticed several hidden folders, each one locked with a password. To her shock, one of the passwords worked. It was the name of one of her pets. Inside were hundreds of photos, images of herself, sorted by year. These were not casual snapshots. They were invasive, taken without her knowledge. In the bathroom, in the bedroom, during moments when she was changing clothes or simply relaxing at home. It was more than disturbing. It shattered her sense of safety. Each new photo added to her growing horror. Some had clearly been captured using a hidden camera, possibly surveillance devices installed in the house. At first glance, someone might have assumed they were random internet images. But Jade knew better. She recognized herself instantly. The pajamas, the room decor, the subtle expressions, the body language from everyday routines no one else should have ever witnessed. Her mind couldn't process the volume of what she was seeing. The initial shock gave way to horror, then to a deep physical revulsion. Her breathing became labored, and a wave of nausea hit her. Everything around her felt like it was collapsing. Each new folder, each new image, only intensified the overwhelming realization that her life had been built on a foundation of hidden surveillance and deception. Jade didn't call emergency services. At that moment, her actions weren't guided by logic or planning. They were purely emotional. She began deleting the files. One by one, she opened every folder, every subfolder, scanning for duplicates or backups. But with each deleted image came the painful understanding that this wasn't something she could just erase from memory. She desperately searched for a way to destroy everything, completely and permanently. Then, she found an external hard drive. The realization hit instantly. This might be where the bulk of the archive was stored. After plugging it in, she discovered the same folder structure, except this time, the number of files was even greater. Jade deleted every image, then physically removed the hard drive from the computer. She struck it multiple times with a heavy object until the casing cracked open. Wrapping it in a towel, she tossed it into a garbage bin outside. Only after making sure the data could no longer be accessed did she return inside and sink to the floor, unable to figure out what to do next. What she had thought was her family turned out to be something else entirely. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was the unraveling of everything she believed in, the destruction of the very values her life had been built around. After destroying the hard drive, Jade found herself spiraling into a state she couldn't control. Sleep became impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, the images came back. In her mind, she saw her own body, familiar yet violated, over and over again. The same thoughts haunted her, stuck in a never-ending loop. He saw this. He saved this. He looked at it for years. She began to feel a kind of internal shame, a sense that something about her was ruined, used, that she no longer had ownership over her own body. Even standing in the shower felt wrong. The water didn't cleanse her, it made her feel even more exposed. She scrubbed her skin until it turned red, but the discomfort remained. Every time she looked in the mirror, she felt like someone was watching again, not seeing her as a person, but as an object. That feeling embedded itself into her sense of self and wouldn't let go. Jade lost all desire to eat. Just the thought of food made her stomach tighten. Her mind was consumed by anxiety, relentless and growing. Every sound outside the door, every footstep in the hallway felt like a potential threat. She found herself listening for noises in the silence, checking locks, keeping the lights on. The fear didn't fade, even in daylight. One thought consumed her. If Tom ever found out she had discovered the photos and destroyed them, he would never forgive her. Jade was certain he was capable of anything. She had no doubt he could take drastic action. She remembered his past behavior, how control and harshness had been disguised as care. Back then, she had mistaken it for protection. Evenings became a time of constant tension. To ease her anxiety, Jade would spread a sheet of plastic she had found in Tom's garage across her bed. It wasn't rational. It was a desperate attempt to feel clean, to feel safe. Sleep became impossible unless she was fully dressed, with the lights on and a knife in her hand. She held it through the night. Reality and fear blurred together. Her exhaustion offered no relief. The paranoia only deepened. The possibility that Tom might learn what she had uncovered and what she had done became her greatest fear. Her life turned into a constant state of bracing for impact. Her body and mind were locked in a continuous fight-or-flight mode. A toxic mix of doubt, panic, revulsion, and fear became unbearable. The mental pressure reached a point where rational thought started to fade. And it was in this fragile state that Jade began planning her next move. Overwhelmed by anxiety, Jade realized she couldn't handle this on her own. She reached out to a man she barely knew, someone she had met just once at a party. They weren't friends. There was no real trust, just a vague memory and a phone number. She sent a short message. No explanation, just that she needed help. There was no response. Not after an hour. Not the next day. He had read it, but said nothing. That silence only deepened her sense of isolation. No one knew what was going on inside her. The one person she had turned to had either gotten scared or just didn't want to get involved. Once again, Jade was left alone with her thoughts, and there were too many of them. They overlapped, collided, confused her. She walked into a hardware store, her shopping basket filled with items she never imagined herself buying. Medications that could sedate, a rope, a shower curtain, gloves. Her heart was pounding. The cashier gave her a curious glance, but didn't ask questions. She paid and left quickly. One question echoed in her head. What if he survives? The items in the bag felt too obvious. Maybe this was just a desperate cry for help? That night, Jade sat in her car, thinking. Should she leave? Just get in and drive, never look back? But where could she go? She had no plan. No one to turn to. Only fear. Fear that if she ran, Tom would still be there, with backup copies, with the power to do more harm. Inside her, a battle began, a desperate urge to put an end to all of it, fighting against the very idea of crossing that line. Committing such an act didn't feel like a solution. It terrified her, but living with what she had seen wasn't something she could do anymore. It felt like a closed loop with no exit. On the morning of December 31st, Jade picked Tom up from the rehabilitation center. Despite his frailty and a recent incident involving self-harm, doctors had approved his discharge with a signed waiver. Jade helped him gather his things and drove him home. On the way, and once inside, she supported him. He was far too weak to move around on his own. Back at the house, she prepared a comfortable space for him in a first-floor bedroom. She set out water, medication, pillows, everything looked like care. But Jade already had a plan in motion. Along with his discharge, Tom had been prescribed Zolpidem, a powerful sleep aid. Aware of its effects, especially in larger doses, Jade handed him several pills under the guise of helping him rest. Tom took them without question. Jade watched as the sedative took hold. His speech began to slur, his movements slowed, and within less than an hour, he was unable to get out of bed. His eyes grew vacant, his breathing heavy. He was still alive, but completely incapacitated. Jade sat by his side, calmly watching him, without any visible fear or emotion, fully aware of how helpless he had become. There was no turning back. Inside her, everything had gone still. Time, thought, doubt. She had reached the moment where the person she once considered family was now entirely vulnerable. The house was silent. No shouting, no dramatic confrontation. Just him, motionless, in bed, and her, silently watching, holding the power to decide what would happen next. As Tom became almost entirely unresponsive, too heavy to move on her own, Jade realized she needed physical help to get him back inside from the porch area. She began texting people. The first was a man she had once been casually involved with. She kept it casual. "Can you help me get my stepfather inside? He's not feeling well." He arrived quickly, but the moment he saw Tom, limp, nearly unresponsive, he froze. He sensed immediately that this was no ordinary situation. Jade insisted, "Just help me carry him inside, that's it." The man reached out, touched Tom, and felt how unresponsive he was. Without saying a word, he stepped back and left. He didn't return her messages after that. Jade then contacted another acquaintance, someone younger, more naive. She told him she needed a hand with some household tasks. But when he arrived and saw a nearly motionless man on the floor, along with Jade's distant behavior, his uncertainty grew. He too declined to help, saying the situation felt off and that he needed to go. Both men sensed something was wrong, but neither called emergency services or alerted anyone. They simply walked away, leaving Jade alone, with her decision and with Tom, who was still alive. His breathing was shallow and strained, his consciousness fading. He couldn't speak or move, but he was still there, alive inside a failing body. Jade remained alone with Tom, now completely immobilized. She didn't act right away. Hours passed after she had managed to pull him back inside. He lay on the floor while she walked in circles, unable to make a final decision, yet far beyond the point of return. Late at night, she placed a plastic bag over his head. He didn't resist. Jade stood nearby, silently watching as his breathing slowed. Then, without a word, she tightened a rope around his neck. Everything happened in complete silence. Tom no longer moved. The next morning, she moved the body to her car. She wrapped it in fabric, tied it securely, and pushed it onto the back seat. The vehicle sat for several hours with the windows rolled up under the direct heat of the sun. Jade stayed inside the house, unsure what to do next. Her phone remained silent. No one was looking for Tom. Everything around her was eerily quiet. By evening, she dragged the body into the backyard. There were old boxes, discarded items, and things no one had touched in years. Carefully, she placed the body in a corner, tucked it between the crates, and covered it with debris. She arranged everything to blend in, nothing that would draw attention. Then she returned inside and locked the door. A full day passed. Jade didn't leave the house. She ignored phone calls and messages, pretending nothing had happened. No one was asking questions. Yet, it looked like Tom had simply disappeared. Several more days went by. Tom hadn't contacted anyone, nor had he returned to the rehabilitation center. At first, the staff wasn't alarmed. Delays like this happened from time to time. But by day 3, concern began to grow. On the 5th day after he vanished, Jade called emergency services. In a calm tone, she explained that she had been looking after a family friend who had spent a few hours at her house after being discharged from the hospital, and then left and never came back. She expressed concern for his well-being and said she had no idea where he might be. That call officially initiated the missing person investigation. Officers arrived the same day. Jade greeted them at the door, polite but visibly tense. She repeated her story. A quick scan of the property and a cursory glance inside the home didn't raise any red flags, and there was no legal basis for a search. Jade gave a description of what Tom had been wearing and provided his contact information. But the next day, staff from the rehab facility informed the police that Tom had failed to pick up essential documents and medication, and his phone had been off for days. This deepened suspicions. Police visited Jade again, and this time the interaction was different. Her earlier composure had begun to crack. She started contradicting herself during questioning. When asked about any recent communication with Tom, she claimed she had deleted their messages to move on from that chapter. That statement immediately raised concerns for investigators. The next morning, police returned with a search warrant. With legal clearance, law enforcement began a detailed examination of Jade's house and the surrounding yard. The initial search revealed very little. No visible signs of violence, no evidence of a struggle, no traces of blood. Jade, looking exhausted, answered questions calmly and briefly, stating she had no idea where Tom had gone. The backyard, cluttered with boxes and construction debris, didn't stand out at first. Investigators noted the mess, but moved past it without closer inspection. Further searches that day also came up empty. The next step in the investigation was reviewing footage from neighboring security cameras. On one of the recordings, investigators saw a car pulling up to Jade's house on the night of Tom's disappearance. Later, someone was seen carrying an object wrapped in fabric out of the garage. The video quality was poor, but it was enough to raise serious suspicion. Police returned to the property with a K9 unit. The dogs became alert near the backyard, which led investigators to re-examine a pile of boxes and tarps stacked in a corner near the alley. Beneath the tarp, they spotted the edge of a carpet, and under it, a body wrapped in cloth. The discovery of the body marked a turning point in the case. At the time, Jade was inside the house. Officers asked her to step outside. At first, she acted confused, as if she didn't understand what they were talking about. When they informed her a body had been found, her reaction was unusually calm. No panic, no tears, just tense silence. The deceased was quickly identified as Tom Merriman. Though the body was in the early stages of decomposition, the clothing and physical characteristics matched. The coroner confirmed that death had occurred within a day of his disappearance. With this, investigators now had not only digital trails, but physical evidence. Jade's home was fully sealed off. Her electronic devices were seized, and her message history was recovered. The time for pretending was over. Her legal status was updated, from witness to suspect. Jade was taken into custody and brought to the station. Her initial interrogation took place with an attorney present. She declined to give a statement. She maintained she had no idea how Tom had died and insisted their relationship had remained positive until the end. While forensic experts worked on collecting evidence, investigators turned their attention to Jade's phone. Forensic analysis uncovered messages where she asked acquaintances to help with Tom and get him back inside. Two of the recipients confirmed they had received those texts and provided testimony. One left after sensing something was wrong. The other declined to participate altogether. In Jade's Notes app, authorities found a troubling shopping list: gloves, bleach, plastic sheeting, rope. Receipts and surveillance footage confirmed these items were purchased just days before Tom's death. Further analysis of her laptop revealed internet searches for zolpidem's effects, toxic doses, and methods of suffocation, without leaving visible signs. On the carpet where the body was found, forensic technicians detected Tom's DNA and fibers from his clothing. On the plastic, they found Jade's fingerprints, despite her denial of any involvement. Phone data confirmed Jade had picked Tom up from the hospital on the day of his death. During the drive, she sent multiple messages, including one that would become central to the prosecution. "I've got him. Everything's going according to plan." A visual inspection of the body revealed no immediate signs of physical struggle. However, the autopsy identified clear indicators of suffocation and zolpidem levels far beyond the therapeutic range. The medical examiner concluded that the cause of death involved both chemical sedation and asphyxiation. At that point, investigators had no doubt Tom's death was not accidental. The case now centered around a premeditated act, carefully planned and executed. At the conclusion of the investigation, the district attorney formally charged Jade Yanks with first-degree criminal homicide. The extensive case included digital evidence, eyewitness testimonies, and expert reports. The trial drew widespread public attention. Journalists were present in the courtroom, transcripts of interrogations were published, and Jade's personality became a subject of public debate. The prosecution built its case on a combination of evidence, messages, purchase history, actions before and after Tom's death. The prosecutor argued that Jade had deliberately led Tom toward his death and then attempted to cover her tracks. The defense, however, emphasized that Jade was a victim. Years of aggressive exploitation by Tom had pushed her into emotional collapse and a sense of hopelessness. Yanks's attorneys proposed a plea deal, a partial admission of guilt in exchange for a reduced sentence and avoiding life imprisonment. But the prosecution rejected the offer, insisting on the maximum penalty. Jade took the stand for her final statement. She said she did not feel guilty for what had happened, but regretted not walking away from the situation sooner. The jury's decision marked the end of a weeks-long trial. After several days of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty on all counts. The judge, relying on the investigation's findings, forensic evidence, and witness statements, handed down the sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. In his closing remarks, the judge noted that despite the personal trauma, emotional stress, and shock, Jade had no legal right to take justice into her own hands. Decisions must be made within the framework of the law. Following the verdict, the prosecutor stated that justice had been served. He acknowledged the moral complexity of the case, but emphasized that from a legal standpoint, the defendant's actions could not be justified. Jade's defense attorneys announced their intention to appeal the ruling. In their view, the court had not adequately considered the long-term psychological harm Jade had endured. The verdict sparked public debate. Some supported the court's decision, stressing the importance of legal order and accountability. Others expressed sympathy for Jade, arguing that she had been cornered by a system that failed to protect her. One of the detectives involved in the case later remarked in an interview, "It was one of the most difficult cases of my career. What happened there is too complicated for black and white judgments. But we couldn't ignore the fact that a life was taken." A few months later, Jade filed an appeal. But the ruling remained unchanged. The sentence was upheld and became final. Thus ended a story that had begun as a close family bond and ended in death, shock, a courtroom battle, and a life sentence. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, And you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.